Kathy, can you hear me?
I can, Amy.
Okay, I'll turn on my video when I'm doing my presentation, but I'm just going to stay off and muted until then.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Fred's gonna try calling in, so we should see his phone number pop up.
It looks like he's unmuted now.
Emily, you're on mute.
Thanks, Kathy. Fred, can you try talking now? It looks like you're unmuted. Nope. Rats. All right, we'll see if we can call in. Hi, Rob.
Rob, did you go see my hairdresser?
I am proud that you noticed to start with, number one. Number two, I did not go to yours at a complete fluke I went by a different barber shop and found that my old guy who has done my hair since I was 10 had moved to this shop on a very limited basis, just on a complete fluke. As I drove by, I saw him in the window.
Wow. Fun
So-
story.
So it was time and I did it. Thank you for noticing.
Oh, you bet.
Hey, Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Put some light on in here.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Tori. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Just checking my AV.
Hi, Tori.
Good.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Just last week of my third term.
Exciting. Is this third term, like, when's the end of the fourth term? Is that the when it's done?
Yeah, I have one more term, but I only have one class next term.
Great.
But it's about wills, estates, and trusts. So hopefully some useful information.
If you want to write your will.
I wrote a will. It's just really unprofessional. I'm not sure how well it would hold up. I was in a near fatal car accident in 2005, and I wrote a will immediately after.
Oh. Well, that'll motivate you, right? I mean, it's when I had my kids that motivated me.
Emily?
Sounds logical.
Hi, Fred. We can hear you.
Okay.
Hey,
Hi, Fred.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, perfect. Laura, did you merge his audio?
no,
I'm
must
still
have done it
working
on
on
its
that.
own.
Oh, perfect.
No, the video went away. I think it's just the phone.
Okay.
Don't wait for me. Start the meeting.
We're just getting Stephanie in from the waiting room.
Are we missing anybody?
I don't
I don't think so.
think so. Once Steph's audio connects, we'll be ready to go.
Are we only going to be 4 commissioners?
5.
Oops, who am I missing here? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yourself,
Somebody-
maybe?
Oh, sorry, there's a second page. Sorry, I didn't see Stephanie. Sorry. My mistake. Now everybody's on the same page. Sorry.
That's okay. I know, sometimes it bumps people into another window.
Fred, are you joining again?
I'm doing my best here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, Laura, that way he'll be able to see the screen too, and we can kind of have both going here.
Okay, there you are, Emily. Okay.
Perfect. There we go. Let me see if I can.
It's not letting me merge it. But
Yeah,
that's fine. It
it's-
doesn't matter.
That's okay. All right, Stephanie, whenever you're ready, I think we have everybody we're expecting, so.
All right, thanks, Emily. Well, good evening. I will call the meeting of the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission to order. It is April 8th, 2021, and I have 5:32 p.m. To call our meeting to order. Oh, Pamela, you're muted to do roll.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kate Murphy is absent. Fred Wolf,
Here?
Rob Eber,
Here,
Aaron Gradinsky is absent. Stephanie Dahl,
Here.
Tori Leviton,
Here.
and Chelsea Scott.
Sure.
Thank you, Pamela. Audience participation, Emily, I don't believe we have any, or did I miss? I can't hear you either. You're still muted too.
You'd think after all this time we'd be better at this, but no.
It's only been a year. We'll learn.
I apologize. We do have one person signed up for audience participation, but they are not here yet. So I think that we can probably move on to the consent agenda, and we can come back to audience participation if that person logs into the meeting.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll move on to the consent agenda. For all the commissioners, you should have received your packet in the mail. It did have our agenda from or our minutes from last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? And if not, can I get a motion?
Yeah, motion to pass the meeting minutes.
second,
Pamela, do you want to go down and call?
So Chair Dahl,
Approve.
Vice Chair Wolf,
Yes?
Commissioner Eber,
yes,
Commissioner Leviton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Perfect. Next we will, Emily, I don't have everybody on my screen. I don't think we got our audience participation, did we? The person who had signed up?
We
No.
did not. I'll let you know if he signs in.
Okay, perfect. Then at this time, we will move on to the new business, the vacation of the city's interest, if any, at the bridle path easements on 2 and 4 of Canto. Did I say that right? I'm sorry. Lane.
Canito.
Canto. Thanks, Fred. Emily, if you want to move forward.
Sure, Jay is actually going to present this one.
Oh, go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Good evening, Chair Dahl, members of the commission. I'm going to give a brief overview of the request here and then ask the applicant to give you their presentation. That way we won't be giving you some of the same information twice, showing you the same maps, those type of things. So before you this evening is an application from the Ethereal Leary Living Trust requesting a vacation of the city's interest, if any, on the bridle paths in 2 and 4 Canito Lane. City Council considered a preliminary petition for vacating these easements depicted on the plats for 2 and 4 Canito Lane at its regular meeting on August 18th of last year. At this meeting, Council determined that the preliminary petition possessed sufficient merit to justify further consideration and authorized further processing of a formal petition for vacation. This public meeting in front of PTRC is the first step in this formal process. The applicant is seeking a formal vacation of the city's interest, if any, again, in the easements in an effort to remove any encumbrances that may create ambiguity on the title of these properties. The city has never maintained or improved these bridle path easements and has not placed them on the Parks and Trails map. The trails are currently inaccessible due to topography and have never been formally developed, and other alternative trails exist in the vicinity that provide access from Holly Street to Highline Canal. So the next steps in the process is staff will take PTRC's recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a public meeting in front of them, and then both of those recommendations will be taken to City Council for a final determination at a public hearing. Staff is recommending that PTRC make a recommendation to Planning and Zoning that the city vacate its interest, if any, in these bridle path easements that are the subject of this application. So at this time, I will ask the applicant to make their presentation, and I will turn it over to Amy Brima, representing the applicant.
Hi, good evening, commissioners and Chair Dahl. If with your permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Amy, it's set up so that you should be able to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just get in the right mode here. So thank you everyone for allowing me to speak to you and make this presentation. This is for the application for 214 Canito Lane, the vacation of the bridle path trail easements that were shown on the map that Jay just had up. I represent the Theory O'Leary Trust. And we are formally requesting approval from you for the vacation of any interest Cherry Hills Village has in the bridle trail easements as shown on the map. Here's the map. Jay just had that up there. And then I have also the actual survey, which shows the easements to be vacated. It's up here at the north of the property, the easement that divides the two lots, and then one to the south. So the reasons why we are asking to vacate the bridle trail easements are as follows. The bridle trail easements at issue are not a part of a viable trail system and have never been used by the public. They do not lead to a public trail system, nor do they go anywhere. Rather, they are unconnected patches of land. They have never been improved or maintained to be utilized as bridle path easements by the City of Cherry Hills Village. And simply put, the City of Cherry Hills Village has never treated the bridle path easements as part of their trail system. Practically speaking, no parking exists to support the existing public trail system, and no place exists to establish parking for use of either the existing public system or the Canito easements. It is not possible to establish a common law theory of acceptance by the City of Cherry Hills Village of the easements shown on the Lake Canito plat or the Canito plat. The bridle path easements have always been intended for private use to benefit only the other owners in the Canito subdivision and were never intended for public use. Cherry Hills Village has previously conceded the absence of any dedication or acceptance language on the Canito plat, which resulted in a failure to establish any intent that the bridle path easements were to be used by anyone other than the Canito residents. The only dedication on the Canito plat is to public utility easements for perpetual use of public utility companies. State law requires that unless there is an express dedication to and acceptance by the public authority, easements created by subdivision plats are for the benefit of and burden on only the owners of property within the subdivision. There is no express dedication to the public on the plats and no acceptance by a public authority with regard to the bridle path easements. As a result, the logic of the prior litigation would also equally apply to the Lake Canito plat. The failure to include acceptance language by the City of Cherry Hills Village on the Lake Canito plat further establishes the intent of the City of Cherry Hills Village that the bridle path easements were intended to be private. I would like to address one of your criteria is what happens after the vacation of the bridle trail easement. The Theory O'Leary Living Trust, the owners of 2 and 4 Canito Lane, will continue to be the owner of the land encumbered by the vacated easement, subject to the bridle path easements of Canito and Lake Canito. There will be no change to the private easements that currently exist on the land. The existing utility easements will remain intact. The access will remain the same and the use will remain the same as the public does not currently use the bridle path easement. I've included the legal description of the requested vacated bridle path easements. They were at the north of the property and the middle and to the south. Thank you. That's the end of my slideshow.
Thank you, Amy. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Sorry, just give me 1 second and stop share. There it is. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. At this time, we will move forward with discussion by the commissioners. Commissioner Scott.
Yeah, so I appreciate the presentation because that did answer a couple questions that I had from Exhibit A that we were given in our packet. Basically, just if this really was indeed a private trail, if it mentions that the city had never improved or maintained the trail, it's never treated as a bridle path easement, and that no parking exists. I did attempt to walk the trails, but I couldn't find parking. So I literally drove into this private, like it says very clearly, private drive. And I couldn't find it accessible. I know on the map that we were provided that you put up earlier, we probably could go in from the Highline Canal, but that was kind of just my initial diligence, was just looking into those paths. And so, I mean, from my perspective, these do seem to be, it appears to be private land. So what I really would just like to know is, you mentioned earlier, Director Goldie, that the staff is recommending the vacation. So if there are any other reasons why this vacation would cause an issue, I mean, I assume that the public utility easement would remain in place and they wouldn't have any issues for utilities. But in terms of the community utilizing these, or the city maintaining them or running them or having them as part of city land, I just don't know if there's a concern there at all. So I would just be curious on that.
No, this would really, nothing would really change. Because we don't go in there and maintain those and that type of thing. And nobody's losing access as in within the subdivision. So we're not taking any driveways away. And all of the utility companies can access everything they need through the existing easements that would remain in place.
And so just to clarify, it will remain under like Cherry Hill, it will still be land that is not owned, but I guess like is considered Cherry Hill's land. It's just you're vacating the ability for it to be public space. Is that right? Or
I will probably let our city attorney either answer that question, or maybe Miss or Amy, you could answer that just to provide, because I think that's a legal answer. So I was just going to call on one of them to answer for us, or if there's two different answers.
How about I take a shot, and Amy, feel free to, or Jay, feel free to chime in. But the underlying fee, which is the full ownership of both 2 and 4 Canito Lane, is held by the Theory O'Leary Living Trust. And what happens, these purported easements lay on top of that. And easements such as this often, not, I'm not making a legal opinion on these right now, but often provide sort of a access across use of, but the underlying ownership of the land remains in the fee owner, which is in this case, the trust. Ms. Brema, Jay?
That is correct. And I want to clarify that this will not affect the private easements that also encumber the land. It would only be any interest that Cherry Hills Village has in those bridle path easements. So the public utility easement shown on the plat, and then also there are some access easements as well shown on the plat, would remain intact. So the easement, it just overlays the land.
Commissioner Scott, does that answer your question?
It does. So I mean, it's just a little confusing because usually, a right-of-way vacation I think of as it shifts control, and so it sounds like the control is going to maintain where it is in the trust, and this is just literally just vacating the right-of-way for basically for people to utilize the space. It's not vacating any of the easements or any of the access that it currently gives. It's just people can't really go there. Which, again, for my opinion, just going over there, it seems very difficult to do anyway to access that space for the public. So
thank you. Commissioner, there's Tori. I was like, Commissioner Levitin next to my screen.
Yes, I know there's a lot of text to dig through. I just wanted some clarification about how the easement was created in the first place. To my understanding, when there's new developments, certain portion has to be left for easements to the city. Is that correct?
Well, that can be the case depending on the jurisdiction, depending on its code requirements. I don't know what requirements were in place when these plats were created, but I might be, it does not appear that these easements were required or dedicated pursuant to any such requirement. I have not researched all documentation to support that, but that is the appearance to me right now. Anybody else? Amy? Jay, anything else?
So I can try and clarify that at the time, both the Canito plat and the Lake Canito plat were recorded. They were recorded by a private party, and the clerk and recorder signed on behalf of the city of Cherry Hills Village, but there was no, so there's two requirements for whether it's an easement, a road, a sewer line, regardless of what it is. The public does not have the ability to dedicate that to require a public body, or a private party does not have the authority to dedicate that to a public body without their acceptance of agreement to take care of that. So a private party can't dedicate a park to the public without the public accepting it and agreeing to the dedication. And that's actually to protect public bodies so that people don't abandon property and expect it to be taken care of by the public. And so in both of these two plats, there is no, there's neither dedication nor acceptance language of the bridal.
Yeah, we're getting into legal argument, and I think that's beyond
Oh, okay, sorry.
what Leviton was asking.
But it is a rationale presented by the applicant. And so to the extent that we want to get into that discussion, there are means that we can do that. I don't want to necessarily pull that card right now, but to the extent that you want to talk about the legal conclusions made by the applicant, there is a way that we can do that in executive session if that's what we all choose to do.
Right. I just want to be sure we were answering Mr. Leviton's question, which was whether or not there was a requirement to dedicate this easement at the time of subdivision. And I think we've got that answered.
So I did have just one more question. Sorry, Tori, I didn't mean to interrupt you at some point, if that's all right.
Please.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
So just to also understand, is there any detriment to the city to losing this space? I mean, it doesn't sound like it. I really had trouble seeing any detriment. And once we clarified that there really isn't loss of any access other than to the public, is there anything that I'm missing there? Any reason why the city would, you know, have trouble with vacating this right away? Any loss to the city?
Emily or Jay, do you want to, in terms of, I don't
Well,
know that you can opine on detriment, but you know, I think what the city would be losing in your work.
in my opinion, and with all the facts and talking to the city attorney, we aren't losing anything because we really don't have anything. We are clearing this up for the applicant, has asked the city to just make it clear that these are private easements, not public easements. So in staff's opinion, we're not losing anything. We are doing some work to make it clear as the applicant has asked.
Now that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Leviton, did you have any other questions?
I'm wondering what happens with other subdivisions? What's been the precedent with easements regarding other subdevelopments, and which of those have been basically the city didn't do anything about it versus the city has actively absorbed those easements into public trails or paths? How does this situation compare with other subdevelopments and how those were platted? I don't know if Emily, if you know any of the history of these other subdivisions and what's happened with those easements.
This is more of a legal question and how the platting documents with the dedication and acceptance language. So there's a difference there, you know, in other ones, such as, you know, we don't do a lot of subdivisions anymore, but there has been in the other platting documents a dedication and acceptance language of those easements.
And I would just add that each document is particular and to each piece of property, and there's specific wording, there's specific law that's in place at the time of the creation of that plat document. There's specific, depictions on the plat that accompany that wording. And so these are very fact specific. To give a full answer to your question, the city would have to do a full analysis of every piece of property that has ever been dedicated to it, or every easement or right thereto. And so it really is a case by case basis. We've been faced with the analysis on this particular two sets of two properties because of this particular request. So that's why we've analyzed this language.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand. I hope I understand.
Wonderful. Any other questions, Commissioner Levitin?
That's all.
All right. Commissioner Eber.
Do you want me, may I yield first to Vice Chair Wolf and ask him? And that way I want to get a little better handle on what everybody has before I jump in.
Absolutely. Vice Chair Wolf, do you have any questions or comments or anything you would like to discuss?
No, I actually did go over to the properties. I did walk all of the properties carefully. In fact, I did run into one of the Canito residents who is a former client of ours. In fact, there are 4 different people in Canito or 4 that we've sold homes to over there. So I actually walked these proposed vacations with her, and I get it. It's I didn't fully understand all this in the beginning, but I do now, and it's unfortunate that I've heard complaints from a number of these people that they're tired of hikers walking through their properties, basically trespassing. When they either going to the Highline Canal or leaving the Highline Canal, and they're just following fence lines up in order to get to back to Holly Street, and they're just tired of it. I know the applicant here is wanting to combine both 2 and 4 Canito properties, and I understand that. The southern line here, just as an aside, when I walked that, I thought, wow, this is the perfect connection in our trail system that would really help people get from basically the Charlevoix subdivisions down to the bridge that goes over the Highline Canal. I know that's a different area, and I brought that up to my friend who lives over there, and she immediately said, no, we don't want that. So they don't want to be part of our trail system. They want nothing to do with our trail system. And so this vacation thing, I would think, should be approved by everybody right now. So I don't have any more questions. I think I understand the issue, and it's too bad that these folks over there have the attitude about our trails that they do. So that's all I have, Stephanie.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it. Commissioner Eber.
Okay. Lots of questions, lots of comments, if you don't mind, and please work with me. I've got a few different pieces of paper that I'm trying to put together. So I want to try and start first and foremost with establishing some basic facts that I don't know if I fully understand. And if it's possible, Emily, for you to pull up the trail map system for the city for this area, specifically the bridge at the canal, and there is a small east-west leg. I'd like to bring that trail map up and ask the question.
Emily, I have it on my screen if you want me to share it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead, because it'll take me a minute to get to it. Thanks, Jay.
Is that what you were looking for, Mr. Eber?
Yes, please. So just to be clear, what we're all working with here is that Union Avenue, right in the center of the map, is a public road with the yellow dots being an on-street trail. And on the west, directly straight across, as Fred mentioned, would be the perfect connection. Already exists Trail 4750, am I correct?
Yes.
And the way I look at the application is that it is asking us to vacate the bridle trail along the entire southern edge of lots 3 and, is it 6?
Track 6.
Track 6, sorry, lot 3, track 6. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, lot 3 is the northern vacation.
Lot,
No,
well,
no.
lot 3, and so the addresses are 2 and 4, but they're
Correct.
lot 3 and 6.
So the entire south edge, though,
Yes.
of 2 and 4 is being asked to vacate. In other words, I want to make clear, are we being asked to vacate 4750 as it goes east-west right there?
No,
No,
that's a dedicated trail that hooks on to the 5247. It goes down to Shenango. So that bridge and trail are all those are all approved trails. Nobody has any issues over those.
yeah.
It's
Well,
my
that's-
understanding, Rob, that this vacation of these, I'm gonna call them the alleged bridle paths at this point in time. They have not ever been listed on our trail system. Is that correct, Emily or Jay?
That's correct. So this application will not affect Trail 4750.
Where, may I ask, where on our application, it seems to denote a proposed or an alleged bridle trail that goes all the way to the canal. So something doesn't make sense. It's on the south edge of 2 Canito and 4 Canito. But does 4750, is that not on 2 or 4 Canito?
That is not. That trail is completely within the property to the south and was dedicated separately with Trail 5247 by the property owner at the time. That was a single dedication outside of the platting process.
Yeah,
So-
that was
so-
Merle Chambers' property. I think she
Yes.
made those dedications. I think that's correct. Mooney owns the property now, but Merle Chambers was the one that dedicated it originally.
So my question is, because I can't tell from any of this, where along the south edge of 2 and 4 Canito does it put us compared to the existing trail for 4750? Is it north of that
It's
little
north.
spur?
Immediately,
north.
yes.
Yes.
Is it immediately adjacent to 4750?
No, it is not. That red line follows the fence line of the Theory property. And the existing 4750 trail is south of that red line, I'm guessing about 20 feet.
Yes, that's correct.
Jay, could you pull up what we have marked as Exhibit C in our packets? It's the red line.
Jay, I have that one handy. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I can share mine.
Only because I think this might help a little bit. Fred, you can tell me if I'm incorrect in this.
Well, and that's why it's not labeled on this Exhibit C, and that's why I think you're going to tell me that the black line is 4750, but it's not labeled.
Thank you, Emily. I couldn't find the stop share.
That's okay. I realized I could steal it.
So,
The black line is the property line.
and between probably the black line and or right around the black line is where Trail 4750 is, correct?
Just
Right.
south of the black line, yes.
You can
Yeah.
I wonder if I can zoom in. You can very faintly see the fence to the south of you can see the fence here.
Oh,
Yeah,
Last line.
and you can see the bridge over the High Line.
Yeah.
So again, is the black line the property line or is the black line the trail?
It's the
That is
property
the
line.
property line.
It's the
trail is
property line.
south of that,
And the trail is, excuse me?
to the south of the black line.
Yeah, immediately to the south of the black line.
So we already have a trail immediately parallel to at least a part of, let me see if I can make this easier. I'll call the very north alleged easement that goes east-west, number 1. I'll call the north-south one, number 2, and I'll call the entire south side that goes east-west, number 3. So for at least a part of number 3, we already have a trail on a part of it.
Correct.
yes.
City? Correct?
We don't have a trail on a part of it. We have a trail to the south of it.
Yeah,
Correct.
but
Correct. But my point is,
They
For
don't.
that
overlap.
section.
Yeah.
correct.
people
there-
people walking north on the property from the bottom, they're walking Shenango or from Shenango, and they come north before they turn left to go down to the Highline Canal. There is a gate right there in the fence. That's the Crapos that live at 4650 South Forest. And they've told me that when people get up to that corner there, they go through that gate and then they just walk up the red line here towards the end of the red line, where it meets their driveway there where Union turns into Canito. And that's part of their irritation of this whole thing. So they just want to vacate. Well, they're in favor of the theories vacating the entire easement there along the south.
Okay. So we have a trail that does the services of the very west edge of alleged easement number 3. And then my question is from the east edge of 4750 to the west edge of Union Avenue, which basically is what Fred just said is the north edge of the Crapo property. How many
Yes.
linear feet are we talking about?
That's a long way.
No, it's not a long way. That's why I want to know how many feet it is.
The southern line, Rob?
With the excluding the width of 4750.
Well, it's
Well, I'm asking the city to measure it and tell me what it is, Fred.
Well, you're going to have to give us a minute.
And then I'm going to ask you what the north-south line length is and the number 1 east-west line is. Well, how many feet are we arguing about here is my point. How many linear feet of trail?
Jay, my computer can't handle pulling our APA map up.
Yep, I'm
while
getting there
doing
right
this,
now.
so, okay. Rob, do you have other questions that we can move forward with while that?
I do. I want to confirm that the 20-foot bridle path easement that we're talking about is all on 2 and 4 Cantato, and none of it is on either the Crapo property, 10 feet on each side, or on the dividing line between 2 Cantato and 3 Cantato, which I think is the Judd property. Again, it's not 10 and 10 on each side of the property line. It's all 20 feet is on 2 and 4 Cantato. Am I correct?
No. There's that easement skews between 2 Cantato and 3 Cantato.
So that 20-foot easement, 10 feet of which is on 3 Cantato. Am I correct?
It varies because it's at a skewed angle.
I don't understand what you're telling me.
That
Let
it
me-
doesn't cut evenly across the property line.
Yeah, so
Correct.
it's not 10 feet on each side, the entire width. It could be 2 and 8, 6 and 4, just depends on where on that easement you are.
So we are
Well,
not being,
according to the survey that's in the packet here, it looks like it's entirely on two Canito.
no,
Because the
vacation
black
is
line
entirely-
is the property line and the shaded is the easement.
Kathy, if we're looking at the, in the packet provided by the petitioner, we have the plat, the surveys. And I see what Fred is looking at. I think this is in Exhibit B. It is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th page.
Page, I'm catching up.
When you walk that right now, it's a post and rail fence all the way down to the Highline Canal. And on the north side of the fence, the Judd's property, it's all completely landscaped. On the south side of the fence, it's just natural grass, open field. And when I walked it, I thought I'm walking the 20-foot vacated easement right now.
I apologize.
that's exactly why I'm asking the question. I want to
I
know whether
apologize.
all of
Okay,
this,
hold on. I'm going to have everybody stop so that we can ask the people who know the answer to this to answer. So Kathy, are you on that page? And I know I just saw in the chat, Amy said she could answer. So Kathy, let's start with you.
So I'm looking at the electronic packet, but we're talking about the survey, right? So I have page 19. So page 1 of the survey or page 2 of the survey. And which one are we looking at, just to be clear?
I was looking, I think the second page of the survey. Yes, the second page of the survey. And I think
Right.
as Fred mentioned that the shaded area with the thick black line above it is the thick black line is the property line. The shaded area underneath is the easement, the alleged easement we're discussing. Is that correct?
That's what it appears to be to me on
That's
this.
how I read it, yeah.
So it stays on the property of 2 Canito Lane, not onto 3 Canito Lane. Is that correct?
That's what
Yeah.
I'm seeing, Jay.
I apologize. I misspoke. I thought that skewed through there. That's the sewer line that skews through there. There's a 20-foot easement on 2 Canito right there. There's a
Lot
separate
3.
easement. There's a separate easement on 3 Canito that is not part of this vacation request.
Does that-
applicant, do you agree that all 20 feet are on your client's property?
Yes, I agree. And I'm happy to share my screen with a survey on it if that would help you.
We're looking right now at
And
the plat
and the
map
same-
called Lake Cantito. I think we're
No,
looking at
this is
that one.
this is the survey, but we can look at the plat too.
And the same holds true for the southern line. It looks like it's entirely on the Theory's property, 20 feet north of the property line.
That's the case on the southern line. Yes.
Yeah, and then it's on either side of the fence that's the diagonal.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're all in agreement. We are dealing with one owner, not multiple and other. Rob, do you have additional questions?
Did you find our distance on that south piece?
Yep, the south piece from the existing trail to Union is 662 feet. The other 2 easements are right at 580 feet each.
580 each. The north and the north one that goes east-west and then the north-south one
Yes.
are each 580. Okay. So altogether, we're talking about 510, 16, almost 1,800 linear feet. Okay.
Plus the width,
Pardon me?
plus the width, right?
Right, linear, I was just talking about how
Linear.
long they are.
Yeah, yeah,
Because they're 20 feet in all of them.
right.
Okay. My next question is on the south, number 3 and number 2 easements. it says, on number 3, it says 20-foot bridle path and public utilities easement. And on the north-south one, it says the same thing. And on the north, it says 20-foot bridle path easement. And then it says paren book 177, comma, page 92, close paren. Am I correct?
We're looking at the plat now, which.
Oops, sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's what you're referencing is the
Correct.
Lake Canada
Correct.
plat? Okay,
Correct.
all right. So that's, at least in my packet, it is page 1, I think, very last page, but,
Yeah, I'm gonna pull them up outside of the packet so that the scans are a
Yep.
little better. Just give me a-
mhm.
Are we on the Lake Canito plat or the Canito plat?
I was on the Lake Canito plat.
Okay, perfect.
And so, Mr. Eber, you were talking about a bridle path easement, which is kind of hard to see here, but there's the big lot 2 across the top, and then there's a dividing line between that and lot 3. And in the middle, actually a little bit to the left of the middle of all of those lines on lot 3, thank you, you'll see kind of in the middle of the dash line, it says 20-foot bridle path easement, book 177, page 92. So on the left of the middle of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question is, I would like the applicant to tell me whether or not, what is the authority for the bridle path on number 2 and 3 along, that's north-south, and then the one the east-west along the south side. What are they claiming to be the authority for those bridle paths?
I'm sorry, are you asking me what the authority is for the vacation of those?
Well, no, I'm asking you, it says that if I want to read the easement for number 1 on the north edge of the property that goes east-west, it tells me to go to book 1777, page 92. Where do I go to find the granting of the easements for the other easements that we're talking about tonight?
So they're all showing on either the Lake Canito plat or the original Canito plat.
Well, on the Lake Canito plat, that's what I'm just asking is I just said that where it says on the Lake Canito plat, it doesn't tell me where it's recorded. It doesn't tell me the book and page on the Lake Canito map. And similarly, it doesn't do it on the Canito plat either.
They're not separately recorded. There's no separate documents with regards to the bridle path easements. They're merely just shown on the Canito plat and the Lake Canito plat. It is required by Colorado law that if you are showing an easement previously recorded, you have to include the recording information, which is why there would be a reference to a book and page off lot 1 for another easement. But that easement doesn't have anything to do with the easements I'm requesting to be vacated.
Say that last part again, if you would, please.
The easement you are referring to on lot 1 has nothing to do with the property.
I'm not talking about any easement on lot 1.
Well,
Hey, Rob, I think for clarification, why don't you, because we've kind of gone round and round and sometimes there's not even questions pending. So why don't you specifically ask the question and then maybe we can get the answer to
Sure,
it.
I'm asking for what the authority is that shows that where I can find the granting of the easement that is between 2 and 4 Canito Lane, and also the south edge of 2 and 4. Because on the Lake Canito plat map, It just says that it shows a 20-foot bridle path and public utility easement. It doesn't have a book and page.
There is no book and page. It's because there's no separately recorded easement. You would only have a book and page if you had a separately recorded easement, or if you were referring to another document.
So, Mr. Eber, to answer your question, the plat is the document that was recorded. That would be the recorded record of these easements, the plat, not a separate document.
Okay. I appreciate that. When did the village turn the properties over to South Suburban? All of the entire trail system, excuse me, and parks. And similarly, when did we get it back?
Well, this has nothing to do with our trail system.
No, it goes to one of the applicant's comments, but is that there's never been any maintenance on it. And if a lot of the time it was because we were prohibited by the agreement with South Suburban, that's an explanation of why the village never did any maintenance on it. Not an acknowledgement that we didn't want the trails.
I believe that the exclusion was completed in 2006, 2007. But I'm not sure what year.
I don't know when South Suburban was created and the city was brought into it. I don't have that date.
So approximately 2006, though, Emily, it seems like that's when we turned over our trails and parks.
Yes, as you know, it was a little messy, but yes.
Right. And then we got it back when?
No, that's when we got it
No,
back.
that's when we excluded from South Suburban.
Oh, we excluded out of South Suburban in 2006.
Yes, it's been about 15 years.
And we went into South Suburban roughly when? Many years, a few years?
When they were created, decades.
Yeah.
Okay, so a long time ago. Okay. My question is whether or not the applicant is willing to make any kind of a settlement that if the village is willing to keep, seek some of them as a trail, is this an all or nothing on behalf of the applicant at this point?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they don't want any trails here, Rob. And if all this is approved, as I'm looking at the plat map here, the wording 20-foot bridle path will be expunged, but public utility easement will remain. Is that correct?
No, it will still be a bridle path for the owners within these subdivisions. They are not asking for the private use of these bridle paths to be removed. It would only be the city's interest, if any, so that would not change. Amy, you can correct me if you.
Correct. The recorded documents will not change. My understanding is that at the end of the city council, if they approve it, an ordinance will be issued vacating the legal description I requested at the end of my PowerPoint presentation, but there will be no change to the actual documents that have been recorded. The plat maps themselves will not be changed.
Okay.
One last question that I've got for you. Go ahead, Fred.
No, go ahead, Rob. I feel like I'm confused again, but go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry,
let me see, Fred, if I can make a comment to you that I believe what the neighborhood is saying is that those are a private bridle path, not a city bridle path. To the extent that this is vacated from the city's interest, if there was one, the city would give up its interest, but it will still say bridle path. It will just only be used, available for the people who live within this neighborhood, Kansas, this subdivision. So your comment about the Crepos and all the other people not wanting people coming through their property, well, their fellow neighbors still can do that.
So they would not be able to go on the Crepos property because there's no easement there at all right now.
Correct.
It's solely on 2 and 4 Canito Lane. So to the extent people are going on their property, it's not in accordance with these plat maps.
Correct. The other question and final thing that I think I've got for you for factual foundation is, if you look at the declaration and agreement establishing protective covenants in Cantato, I don't know what page it is in our packet because I've moved my packet around and I'm not using the electronic version, but if you could bring that up specifically, the well, help me find it, but only it does say that these bridle paths are supposed to remain open and no planting or anything is supposed to be in these bridle path and public utility easements. Does it not say that?
I'm sorry, Rob, what document are you looking at?
I'm looking at the declaration and agreement established protective covenants in Cantato. It is part of our packet
Yep, give me just a
and I'm looking for the specific page.
Well, I can tell you that these easements as they exist right now are not open, particularly the right side of the southern line there, that is completely landscaped. It is not an open 20-foot easement. The northern one against the Judd's property, that's pretty much open all the way to the High Line. So it just varies. People have landscaped it or naturally landscaped it, whatever, but they're not completely clear.
I'm just going to interject here because I want to make sure there's some clarification for me and for everybody. My understanding of the petition that is in front of us is this. Nobody is saying that these bridle path easements do not exist. Everybody is in acknowledgement that they do in fact exist. The public utility easements exist. The issue is whether those bridle path easements were ever conveyed to the city of Cherry Hills to be used as public trails. Is that correct, Kathy?
That's correct.
So this isn't a question of whether we're going to vacate those or whether they will no longer exist or anything else. It is our discussion surrounds whether the petition, I think, is just to clear up that confusion. So that's really our question, not whether these will go away or anything else. It is truly just, they will exist there. It's just whether or not we're going to recommend to city council that they be vacated and there isn't a further litigation discussion, whatever, regarding the city making claim to it, so to speak.
And if I could clarify, Chair Dahl, the ultimate question that is being asked, that the city will be asked to answer, or determination that the city will need to make, is whether or not the requested vacation is in the best interests of the city. And so that goes beyond the legal question, which you asked me and I answered, but it goes beyond that, because even if there were no question about the legality or existence or dedication of anything, a full, no questions asked legal issue, the city has the right to vacate that if it wants to, if it decides it's in the best interest, whether it's to shed maintenance costs or obtain something else in exchange. I mean, it's a legislative determination by the city as to whether or not it's the best interest to vacate. So that is the bigger question. And then
Correct.
to the point Mr. Leviton raised earlier, we have some specific real property questions that are surrounding an understanding of what's at issue here.
Fair enough. Okay.
My question, Chair, in asking this question about the covenants is twofold, and I'll just flat out say it. To the extent that the city says it would take a lot of effort and maintenance so that it's not in our interest to maintain any of these as a part of our trail system, my comment to you is that the covenants already require all of these people to keep these bridle paths open. And to the extent that they have been fenced closed, that's already a violation of their own neighborhood covenants. To the extent that they have trees and things that would cost money, they're already violation of the bridle path covenant. So they're not really good arguments as to why or why not the city might or might not take them in our interest to decide that these are worthwhile to our public trails. So that's the point of why I asked it. I'll move on and go back now that I have asked all of the factual questions that I was trying to ask. And I will return now with your permission to my comments and question and additional discussion. And that is that as follows. I have heard what my fellow commissioners have to say. I appreciate what they have to say. The applicant has provided us with the rationale for many of the reasons why we should vacate these. Many of those are legal conclusions of issues that if we want to discuss whether or not they're valid legal conclusions or whether or not they're accurate, we need to go into executive session. But I will first tell you that, fellow commissioners, we are PTRC. We are Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission dedicated to providing the citizen of Cherry Hills perspective. We have a fiduciary duty on behalf of the citizens of Cherry Hills. It says to enhance and preserve the trails and parks in Cherry Hills Village. That alone should lead us to conclude that we need to vote against the vacation of this property, because to give up something that potentially could be a trail is not in the best interest of the village. We have heard time and time and time and time again that our city residents value public open space and trails, and they value bucolic spaces. We just went through a discussion of e-bikes where we received approximately 130 comments, all of which talked about the bucolic nature of Cherry Hills. This is one of the most bucolic areas within the bucolic area of all of Cherry Hills. And it is something that should be enhanced, and it should be something preserved. That alone tells me we should be voting against this vacation. Whether or not other voices up above, either at P&Z or at before council, weigh in other factors that we may not consider as much. The fact of the matter is, as PTRC, there is no way in good conscience we should be voting to allow this vacation. Number two, this applicant, even though the code allows people to seek to vacate, this action to vacate is the improper forum by which to make the determination that the applicant is seeking. Rather, it should be a quiet title action, is the way it should have gone. The petition says they are seeking to vacate any alleged or possible interest that the city may have. Either we do or we don't have one. If we do have one, they should move to vacate and acknowledge that we currently have one. And if we don't have one, this entire thing is moot because there is no public interest already. And therefore, them coming to ask us to do their dirty work is improper. We should not be the ones making this decision. It should be a quiet title action. If the owner of this property really thinks there is no public access and no public component of these bridle, they should move for a quiet title action. It involves only their own property. If they believe that there is no public interest, they should seek a declaratory judgment via a quiet title action. We should not be asked to do this. Only if these guys formally acknowledge that there is a city interest in these properties. First and foremost, we should not be looking at this otherwise. It is a waste of time. There is no case or controversy here. You can move to vacate. The code says you can move to vacate public space, roads, easements, right-of-ways. They're not even acknowledging that this is a road or right-of-way. If they want to actually acknowledge the city has a legitimate claim to these properties, then we'll consider whether or not there's a proper vacation petition before us. Otherwise, this petition is not appropriate. To the extent
What
that
do you, I'm looking at you, Stephanie. What do you think of that? You know, Rob, there's a lot of what you say, Rob, that I agree with you. I agree with you. And maybe there's a middle ground here. Maybe there's a middle ground. That section on the bottom right, if that could be part of our trail system, that's an important link that gets people to the Highline Canal along the northern border of the Crapos property. I don't know. Maybe there's a compromise here. I get why they want the diagonal across that separates the two properties. When they bought Ed Connor's property at 4 Canito and they tore his house down, my understanding is they want to build a big horse barn there and they don't want this trail going right through their property. I get that. But this one on the south side, I would love to see that become part of our trail system.
Here's what I would say in answer to your question, Fred. In terms of that this is the proper action, that is not for me to determine. What we have we're here today. I'm not here to determine the legality of whether they came forward the correct way. That is not what the PTRC is here to do. They have followed our rules, and that's for city council ultimately to make the decision, the city attorney. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to speak up, but I understand where you're coming from, Rob. I'm not saying, I'm not going to opine on it. I am not a property attorney. And so it is not my area of expertise, nor am I on this commission as an attorney. I'm on this commission as a resident of Cherry Hills. And so in terms of whether this is the proper way to do it, it is before us. The question before us is whether we are going to recommend to vacate or not whether the process is correct or not. Now, to your point, I'm not saying we can't address that at a later time, but the issue before us is whether or not we're going to recommend.
Kathy, what do you think of Rob's comment?
Let me jump in before Kathy does and save
Sure.
her from making a legal comment. And she's going to tell you that it's a legal opinion that needs to be discussed. If we're going to discuss it, it's going to be an executive session.
Okay.
Kathy,
Am I right, Kathy?
Well, I will tell you that the purpose of this vacation process was adopted to supplement vacation of rights of way process provided in state statute. It specifically defines within the process, within this section of right of way, the ability to, well, right of way includes designated public street, alley, et cetera, including pedestrian or equestrian trail easements. So whether or not it has been used as such or owned by the city. So there's a process established in your city code, in your home rule city code, that supplements the statewide vacation process. I don't think that quiet title actions are still available. This process is an alternative.
Okay, let me, if it's all right, return to my discussion and just tell you that I am personally offended that we are being asked to do the work that I think is not the appropriate. It's a bridle trail that they are asserting as a private bridle trail. If they want to vacate it as a private bridle trail, they don't need the city input on that. It's their own property, it's their own interest. They are asking the city to vacate whatever interest we have, which it is something which is none of our dang business, to be honest with you. However, I will return to the point that says, to the extent that this commission is asked to opine on whether to recommend or what is our recommendation about vacating this, I will tell you that this request, in my opinion, is inconsistent with our master plan. Provision 1 of our master plan, and I pulled it out. I apologize that I did not ask you to load it onto your system, but Out of our Cherry Hills Village Master Plan, page 7, it says open space, parks, trails, recreation, goals and strategies. In the second paragraph, it says the following principles guide the development of goals and strategies to protect and promote these amenities. Number 1, as the village becomes more developed, it should explore new ways to acquire public open space. Even if this is not currently public space, as Commissioner Vice Chair Wolf mentioned, it's a great connection source. We should be exploring ways to acquire more open space. I differentiate strongly the value of the east-west requests from the north-south request. The north-south request only benefits one person, the property owner. The east-west request to go out and acquire public open space is 600 feet of access that either already is public and should stay public, in my opinion, or something that we, under our open space master plan as Parks Trails, move to add and acquire to our open space. We're not asking this property owner to let us go through the middle of their property. They have a 12-acre parcel of which we are asking them to concede 20 feet times approximately 600 and whatever the distance was, 606 feet is 12,000 square feet, I believe, if I do my math correct, out of over 12 acres of land. Part of what our village says, and all of the residents say, is that our open space and our trails is why they move here. And to give up this land or any argument for this land is going directly contrary to the provision 1 of the master plan. To the extent that at the bottom of the page, it says that the strategy is that we should encourage open space preservation and open space acquisition through conservation easements, deed restrictions, recreational easements, and other land use restrictions. It is telling us that we should go out and add, not subtract, from our village system where it's appropriate to do so. On the bottom of page 8 of the master plan, it then goes ahead and talks about trails. There's a specific heading. It says the village trail system provides places for daily exercise, transportation, social interaction, and enjoyment of open spaces and natural features, provides both on-street and off-street facilities, and accommodates equestrian and pedestrian use and bike traffic. It includes both formal and shared. And then it talks about, on the top of page 9, specifically the goal: preserve the existing trail system. I am not conceding that this is not part of the trail system, and our goal in the master plan is that we should preserve it, and we should design and pursue opportunities to enhance and expand the trail system that are practically and economically achievable. And the strategies, specifically number 2, identify and investigate opportunities to fill in gaps in the trail system and to increase connectivity. This trail does exactly this easement that we are talking about. This bridle path is directly the ability to provide connectivity of Union, where it's already a public road and an on-street trail, 800 feet to the Highline Canal, where there's already a bridge. There is no better connection possible than this trail. It is, in fact, along the south edge of Cantitos 2 and 4. It is the only property that would allow direct access east and west onto the Highline Canal. No other trail allows that.
Can I interrupt for a second? Because I have a question. When I'm looking at that map, it appears that where the red line stops is not at the street. So we're going to have to get another easement from the property owners at 4650 South Forest, correct? Provided that
No, I don't read it that way. Chair, if you look on the land survey plat for Canito Lane, this 20-foot easement is to the north of the property line separating the Theories and the Crapos. If that shaded area is accurate. So this future bridle path would be completely on the Theory's property, which at this point right now, after they demolished Ed Connor's house, and it's, you know, there are a few trees up in that corner, but it's basically open. So I don't think from a legal standpoint it's on the Crapos property at all.
Okay. And then Rob,
If I might,
go ahead.
there is no trail easement on 7 Canatos, so Chair Dahl, you are correct. There would still be a gap between Union Avenue and this trail.
That's what I thought, is that it doesn't go all the way, their property does not go all the way through, or the easement itself does not go all the way through to the street.
Well, it
Correct.
goes up to the road that is Cantato Lane. So the
Yeah,
question
it's
is that part of Cantato at the very top where it joins Union, has it yet become a private street, or is it still part of Union? Or is it, what is it?
Amy,
I
do you
think my
know
point
where-
is, it's a legal question.
There's still a gap there, though, if you look at the map that's up there where the red line ends compared to where Union starts. I don't know how large that space is.
But it ends in the
out
middle
there.
of the road that is Cantato. So the question is that portion of Cantato public or private? And we don't know the answer to that. It's a legal question. But my point, as I was saying, is that this has direct opportunities for connectivity to the
Okay,
trail.
but here was the next question that I was going to pose on that. So then to your argument, Robin, just, you know, looking at all of this, if let's assume that this was never conveyed to the city of Cherry Hills, okay? And I understand that our master plan is to try and acquire more, but I don't want to speak out of turn, but from what I've heard and everything else, this would never be turned over. So I think that's kind of where I'm going, is all of your arguments, and I understand where you're coming from. It appears that it is couched in the belief that we have this right, that we have secured this easement. But what if we haven't? Then where are our next steps? Because it does not sound like these homeowners are willing to concede that land, that easement, for public bridle use, to be a
With the-
public bridle trail.
I appreciate that, Chair. My comment response is as follows. With the exception of Vice Chair Wolf's comment that appears that he spoke with the Crapo family that doesn't love it, I don't know if all of the people that are the applicants here, I asked counsel for the applicant if it was an all or nothing, it was an all. We don't know, frankly, whether or not a settlement could be reached that would allow that to happen. There's never, to my knowledge, been that discussion that would allow for a acquisition of the north 20 feet on the south edge of these two lots. We don't know whether or not there might be some way to allow an on-street trail along Cantato Road that's deemed a private road that would then allow a easement along what I called number 1, along the north edge of 2 Cantato Road, from where Cantato Road dead ends, which is even shorter than 600 feet. It's 580 feet, I think we were told. Whether or not that might be an option, we don't know any other options. If this is not part of the city's trail system, I am in no way conceding that it is not part of the trail system already. But from the extent, as I said, to the extent that it is part of the trail system, it should be pursued, it should be added. It is a part and parcel. It should be developed. It should be used. It provides an incredibly strong link, notwithstanding certain residents' NIMBY feelings that they don't want their neighbors to the east of Holly coming into their neighborhood. The fact of the matter is, I spoke with 4 different neighbors who said they would love to be able to walk directly to the Highline Canal. And this would provide not only an ability to do that along that south edge or any of these easements that are at issue, these bridle paths that are at issue. But frankly, this provides an essential service that you could go one direction on either the Pond Road Trail, which by the way, does not go all the way to the Highline Canal, and then go on the Highline Canal and circle back and come east on what could be a trail, or to the south to the extent that there is a trail that goes east-west approximately a quarter mile to the south. It also does not go directly to the Highline Canal, but it connects to the trail that goes north and south that then connects into the 4750 that we talked about before. But it could provide a good circuit. So there is no argument that can be made that this does not pose an important connectivity to the trail system of our area. And in fact, it provides a very important connectivity to the neighborhoods on the other side of Holly Street and even up into Happy Canyon and Southmore Vista. Because their only alternative to get to the Highline Canal is to walk down Quincy to Dahlia. Even on a north-south basis, the trail that goes between 2 and 4 provides valuable services right now. The only person who benefits from vacating that trail is the property owner, one party amongst all of Cherry Hills, and we have a fiduciary duty to act on behalf of the interests of all of Cherry Hills Village. So my argument is, while they don't want to have people in between their two parcels that they voluntarily bought without clearing this issue out first, maybe they should have gone to clear that issue out first instead of asking.
That same thing, Rob, occurred to me when the theories bought all these. I've seen the original plats, and it's very clear. It says bridle path easement, and they didn't do anything about it way back when. I'd love to know what Amy thinks of our idea of providing a trail on the southern side here. Does she think that the theories would absolutely give that a thumbs down?
So I'd have to reconfer with them, but when we have had these discussions in the past, all of this came up. The city had not previously taken the position that there was an interest in this until the litigation related to, I think it's 2 Tenaya Lane up there.
Yeah, it's Greg Maffei's property.
Yeah, and that's when the city took the position that they had an interest in this property or in these bridle path easements. I don't think, as it's not shown on your publicly trail maps, that the city had ever previously taken that position. And we've had several discussions with the city I've been working on this for several years now, and I do not think they have any interest in conceding this issue. The litigation was very clear that the city does not have a public interest in these easements.
Amy, is it your belief in speaking with your clients and such, just to clear up what you just said, is that when they purchase the other property, because I think, just to clarify again for everybody, nobody's contesting that bridle path easement is not there. The issue is whether it was ever conveyed to the city. And so was it your client's position that when they purchased the property, they never had a belief that it had been conveyed to the city, so they didn't clear it up at that point, because they're not trying to totally vacate the bridle path? It's just vacate it, or just, I guess, clear it up for purposes of the city's interest in it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Rob, is there anything else?
Yes. As I mentioned, my belief is that the public interest that we represent requires the city to spend time, energy, and money, frankly, on trails that enhance and benefit the trail system overall. Everybody talks about what a great system we have. This provides essential services. With due respect to Mr. Goldie, I do believe it does have very important connectivity. It does have the ability to provide loops, and it does provide a great opportunity for the cost of what could only be, even if we only did one of them, the 600-foot south edge, whatever. The fiduciary interest that we have requires the city to spend and maintain money And I've had this discussion with city staff. You know, they blessed us and spent lots of money on a park, and we are very lucky to have a city that does allow us to do that and enjoy that. And I want to say, you know, on behalf of that, we thank the city very, very much, and we appreciate that. I do think that making these into trails and, you know, further using them on behalf of the city, whether they are just natural native trails that don't necessarily need to be massively developed, to provide an entirely alternative experience to the people of Cherry Hills, that provide access directly to the Highline Canal, the only direct path, by the way, even with all three of them, that allow a path directly to the Highline Canal from any point east of the Highline Canal in the village. They provide essential services. And we should be willing to do that. We should not, as a PTRC, see that there's any effort, and we should not, you know, fold to any effort on behalf of the citizens regarding trails.
So Rob, can I make a comment here?
Absolutely.
First of all, I really appreciate all the in-depth analysis you did here, because it did bring up some great points, and I completely understand our duty and our obligation as PTRC to protect and maintain our trails, to increase its accessibility, and to basically to just, you know, do what's best for the community as a whole. And I don't disagree with that. A couple things I want to mention though. So I live actually halfway between the access points of Dahlia and Quincy as you head to the trail there, and this access point. And until this meeting, I never knew about this access point. And I have to say, when you use the word appropriate, it made me think about when I pulled in there today, it felt inappropriate for me. Okay, personally. I felt like I was in the backyard or within these homeowners, I was on their property. And so when you talk about the fiduciary duty we have as well, I'm curious because it would be a really long haul for me to actually come down Quincy and then come down Holly and walk. I'd probably have to walk down, or, you know, I don't know where I would park. But what obligations would the city have to actually make this more accessible? Because I see some costs associated with either having parking available for people who are not coming from just across Holly or not coming from the immediate vicinity. Personally, I do not feel that it's a welcoming access point. And so again, when I come to Quincy and Dahlia, whether I'm walking, biking, or driving, it feels like a publicly accessible access point. So I just wanted to bring that up because I'm curious that if this was not vacated and the city were to pitch to have more control over these spaces and they went from private to public, how people would actually get there other than people in the immediate area, because we are looking at this as a community at large issue. And so that's where I would come in, because literally, I mean, first of all, when you pull into Cantato Lane, it says private road, no turnaround. Like it says that, literally, a gigantic sign right at 7 Cantato, between 7 and 4 Cantato. And you pull in and you feel like you are in a private community. And so I don't know how that part would be changed, because that accessibility piece that you're trying to provide and that connectivity piece does not feel very connective or accessible from what I experienced, at least.
I appreciate your comment, Commissioner Scott. If I can answer your comment or respond to your comment by again bringing back up the city trail map of all the trails in the area. Where I was going next, and it will be supported by the map, comes up is I have never, and I don't believe parking is ever an argument upon which to make a decision about the trail system. There are many, many places in this village. These were originally set up as bridle trails, not places for people to come and park cars and move about, and commensurate, whether they be bike trail, walk trail, horse trail. None of those uses require a car. And there are places that you will see to the south and west of where we are talking about right now that are trail number just to the north of Village Club, 5048, any of the north-south trails that come off of Bellevue. None of those have parking. And yet they're viable. Look at the interconnectivity that they provide to that area. Look at the basis upon which somebody walking off the Highline Canal can go and make a loop and return back to the Highline Canal. And as we all know, the Highline Canal is the #1 recreational asset in the village. So imagine if you could walk off the Highline Canal, walk through these areas that we are talking about tonight, and return back to the Highline Canal. You don't need to have access and parking. Or commensurate, similarly, if you were to come anywhere by foot in any of the neighborhoods to the north and to the east, there are no trails in the city right now covering that entire eastern section of the city, with the exception, I'm sorry, of a tiny north-south trail linking Charlevoix-Chaumont to the area of Charlevoix on the very east side. There are no trails. The master plan directs us to move and try and seek and connect pieces of the city that are not connected. And this is the best chance and the best rationale to do exactly what the master plan tells us to do.
So
So
I
my
guess-
argument to you, or my response to you, is that parking is a non-issue, and it's never a basis upon which to decide whether or not we have parking.
Right, and I understand that. And so here's my thought. There are lots of different, what I'll call nooks and crannies in the connectivity of the trail system. And I enjoy finding those and discovering those on different walks, bikes, hikes, whatever, whatever I'm doing at the time. And I hear what you're saying there. I guess my question is, for some of them, okay, so I'll give you an example if you want to use something specific. If you're coming in from Quincy and Dahlia from that particular entry point into the High Line and you are heading south, there are a couple really neat little offshoots with bridges where you can go, onto trails that are unpaved and you can bike them or walk them. However, there are usually fence lines and different kind of markers that make it clear that these are the specific areas. Would there be some financial commitment from the city side where they have to actually now, if it becomes, again, under their control a little bit more, if it becomes part of the connectivity of the trail, would they have to put any kind of investment into making it appear more accessible and not like private land?
Yes, but it's minimal.
Okay.
There would be some additional fencing required, but if you walk that right now, as I told you, I have, you get down to the point of 4750 and you think, oh my gosh, this would be an unbelievable connection. And I completely agree with Rob. For us to walk away from an opportunity like this it's almost just being flat out irresponsible for what we do.
Yeah,
Can
and
I ask this question of Chair Wolf, I'm Chair, Vice Chair Wolf and Commissioner Eber. I can understand where you're coming from and what our duty is in PTRC and preserving these trails. So I'm not disagreeing with you all on this. Playing devil's advocate, if the city actually, and this is not an opinion, I'm not asking anyone for an opinion, but if we have no legal interest in it, how do you justify going forward on this when they were trying to clear something up and now we're trying to enter into settlement to take part of their land for a bridle path for the public when it was never ours to begin with? So just playing devil's advocate on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, we are talking about such an infinitesimal small portion of their land. They have,
Their land.
It's their land, 7 acres on the left property, 5 acres on the right property, and 20 feet along some 600 feet of post and rail fence. I'm sorry, I can't believe that Denise and Kent Theory would look at that and just be totally unreasonable.
And I'm not saying they wouldn't if we asked them to, but again, that's also in my opinion is it's two separate issues. If this is not, the city doesn't have a claim, I don't think that ever precludes us from also going to them and asking in a different context, would you be willing to donate this easement? But I think that.
Let me jump in, Chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Just one more question. What leverage does PTRC have in this issue right now? is this, are they just coming through us to kind of, for lack of a better word, be nice to us, even though we don't have any legal standing? Or do we have some kind of leverage?
We have we make a recommendation to city council, and city council will ultimately make the decision.
It actually goes, your recommendation goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission per the process set forth in your code. And P&Z makes a recommendation to city council, which then, depending on the recommendation, will or will not consider an ordinance for vacation.
Well, could our recommendation, Kathy, be crafted so that it says we completely approve of the proposed vacations on the north-south diagonal, and on the north side we reserve, I don't know what the legal term is, we reserve judgment on the south side, which will allow us further study of this. So we're giving them 2/3 of what they want, and we're going to hold out for a little more study on the south side.
Well, I think the requirement is that you give a recommendation to P&Z on what action to take, whether or not to vacate. So saying that you want more time to study it would be unusual.
Well,
I can say I've not read,
we can word it so that it's just a little more firm and say we approve the proposed, we recommend that the proposed vacations occur on the diagonal on the north side. On the south side, we propose that be a dedicated city trail connecting Union to the Highline Canal. I don't know what wording you want to put in here, but we've got to have something
yours. That you can make that recommendation that city council consider that. That's within your purview, I believe.
Or individual as well as collective. But
well, you have to make a recommendation as a body, not an individual.
Correct. I guess my comment, go ahead, Fred.
Well, I do one more comment for Amy. Is she still with us?
Yes. Yes, I am.
How many residents are in the Canito area?
I think there's 11 lots there.
Okay. I know we have a list here in our packet of all of them.
Those are all the ones within 500 feet of 2 and 4 Canito.
Okay. Have they gotten together and talked about this? I mean, are they all 11 people on the same page?
So I haven't spoken to all of them. Several of the people have reached out to me, and I know at least one, if not two, sent letters of support. I am not aware of anyone who's opposed to it.
Okay.
We've received, Fred, we've received 2 public comments. One from the Crapo family and one from somebody on the north side that is on Tenaya Lane, I believe.
Yeah, Mr. Bennis.
Mr. Bennis. Both of whom support the application. Nobody else has weighed in. Nobody outside of the neighborhood has weighed in. I did speak today when I was looking at the property to a resident at 1 Tenaya Lane, whose comment was that she would love to have the ability to walk down Union straight to the canal. I spoke today to 2 people who live in the Charleau neighborhood, each of whom is absolutely in favor of this trail existing, somehow connecting Holly to the Highline Canal on these 3 trails, not just only about the south side, but even being able to do a small loop within Canito.
Yeah, I would think if all the residents of Canito were aware of the discussion that we are having right now on this trail connection, I would think that we would have a lot of people in favor of this. I mean, if it cut across some critical area of the Theory property, it's just open pasture, far away from their home, far away from probably whatever the horse barn they're going to build. It doesn't cross their property. It just follows a fence line. So it doesn't even have to be 20 feet. It could be 8 feet. I would love to see us pursue this a little further and make people aware of what we're talking about.
I guess I
So-
would on the, go ahead, Rob.
I guess let me sum up my discussion points and then you can toss it all back wherever you want. You know, for all the reasons that I've set forth above, I think that for us to recommend that we agree with the petition to vacate is the wrong thing to do. Whether it is seeking additional discussions and tabling this and seeing if there can be a mutual resolution. My point is that this area provides substantial services to the trails of the city that are open to everybody in the city, notwithstanding the privacy concerns of the theories. I get it. There are lots of people in this village who are very, very wealthy and very, very private that have trails next to them. Frankly, that's what makes Cherry Hills great. Everybody talks about our trail system. Everybody talks about the Highline Canal. Everybody talks about our semi-rural area. These trails are the ultimate of undeveloped natural trails that provide great services. I will close by asking my fellow commissioners this question, and that is, part of this whole thing goes, Chair Dahl asked us about assuming this is or is not a legal right of the city to these trails. It goes to the legal argument. For those of you on the commission who didn't follow it or don't know about it, the litigation that the counsel for the applicant talked about, and I know Fred, you mentioned it, is what was called Maven Properties, which is just to the north of this, where there was this exact question about whether or not a trail that was a bridle trail between two properties up there was a public or not public trail. And there are factual differences, and as city attorney mentioned to us, everything depends on factual specific situations and application of the facts and the law to that particular case. But the arguments that are being raised here by the applicant are exactly those that were raised in Maven. So I'm for fighting for our rights until I know we don't have them. We may or may not have some of the same legal issues that existed in other litigation. And we can talk about that in executive session with counsel if you want to. And so my question to you is, do you want to? And if so, I'll move us into move to ask us to go into executive session. But I'm not going to do it unless you guys find the pros and cons. We all may think this is the greatest idea ever. And if we have no legal claim to it, we may consider walking away. But until you guys have that legal argument of the pros and cons and fully understand the litigation that took place to the north, as well as the opinions that would exist on this, if it were to go to litigation, we're left with is this a valuable piece of property to the city and the trail system? My argument is yes. So I will leave it to Chair Dahl. If you would like to take a poll about whether people want to go to executive session, or I can just move that we go into executive session.
Rob,
If
you
not-
need to move. We don't take a poll. If you want to go to executive session, you make a motion. If not, we'll continue on.
Well, I don't want to waste it. Well, not knowing the answer to my question, I will go ahead. I move to go into executive session under section 24-6-4024B, Colorado Revised Statute, to receive legal advice from counsel on the specific legal questions regarding the petition to vacate the city's interest, if any, in the bridle path easements 2 and 4 on Cantato Lane.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Pamela, will you take a vote for us?
Sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Chair Stephanie Dahl,
I vote no.
Vice Chair Fred Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Rob Eber,
Yes.
Commissioner Tori Leviton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Chelsea Scott. Commissioner Scott?
Oh, so sorry, no.
So we have 3 yes and 2 no.
So the requirement is for 2/3 of the quorum present to approve to go into executive session. And Emily, can you confirm my math? But with 5 members present, that requires 4 yes votes to go into executive session.
That's correct. We would need 4.
So the
Right.
motion fails.
May I, math, 3 out of 5 is 60%. And you said we need how much?
2/3.
2/3, 66%. Okay.
So the motion fails.
All right. I will say this, I know I've kind of interjected comments and questions along the way. I've read everything that has been given to us. I've reviewed all the plots. And I 100% hear and agree with a lot of what Vice Chair Wolf and Commissioner Eber have said about our role on the PTRC. Our trails are incredible. It is why people live here. It is why people come here. It is why they visit here. With that said, I also believe that our residents 100% value their rights as landowners. And when I look at all of this, and I am not a proponent of taking or entering into settlement and if it's not appropriate. I don't disagree that this would be a wonderful connectivity. But in terms of stating that we're going to move forward just to see what we can get is not where I would feel comfortable going forward. So there is access to the High Line with the trail 5247 into 4750 that does feed into the High Line. I am not opposed that PTRC look into requesting of these homeowners if they would be willing to provide an easement. Because I don't disagree with either Commissioner Eber or Chair Wolf that it would be wonderful. And maybe the residents there would also appreciate it. So I'm not opposed to that. But in terms of the question and the petition that is in front of us based on the information we have provided, and even saying, and which is why I guess I would just express that I'm not in favor of saying, we'll vacate 1 and 2, but we want 3, so we want to keep continuing. My recommendation would be to go forward with the motion as proposed by the city.
Jeremy, I jump back in and just talk one thing, a point.
Yes.
There has been a great deal of discussion tonight about whether the city has a claim to these. I think we are missing an opportunity to have a very good discussion about whether or not the city has a claim to these things. As I mentioned, many hearings on many different things, I am a huge proponent of the city protecting the property interests that it has to the same extent that private property owners, I hope, will protect the private property rights that they have. To the extent that these are city property, we should be fighting like hell to keep them. We should be fighting like hell to make them available for the city and its residents. So I don't want to force anybody to give us anything that we don't deserve. But to the extent that we have a claim on these trails, we should pursue it to its entirety. And given our mission of Parks, Trails, and Rec to enhance and protect the public, the trail system, to walk away from something like that before we know whether or not we have a real legal claim or have settled the real legal claim or litigated the real claim or settled it or whatever it is, every one of us has to walk on the premise that we have a legal claim on those. And I don't know whether or not this is precedential for all the other trails that we've got in the city, As we heard from city attorney, everything is factually specific, applying the law to the specific facts of the trails. But the argument here that we had gotten from applicants' counsel is that these were not properly dedicated nor accepted. And I just am very nervous to accept that when we don't know what that argument leads to for the rest of our trail system. We have many miles of trails in this city. We have lots of arguments about lots of them. And I would hate to cave here and make it precedent for other places until we know. And we're not going to go into executive session unless somebody else wants to move for it now and pass a different vote. My vote failed. My motion failed. But the reality is that we are dealing, in my opinion, with the camel under the nose of the tent here with respect to all of our trail system in Cherry Hills. Until we know what our legal claim is, I don't want to force anybody to give something, but I believe we still have arguments that these are ours and we should pursue them. And we should not at PTRC give them up. And even, let me tell you in closing, that even if we do, the code allows us to ask for consideration. The only person, and I guess my question is right now as part of the vacation process, is the applicant willing to make payment of consideration for vacation of these trails as a part of its application? Because everywhere else, that has never been an argument.
So can I ask a clarifying question here? Commissioner Ebert specifically. So where are you finding evidence that the city may have some claim here? That's what I'm struggling with. And I just want to clarify something. I am in no way against this either. I completely understand how special and wonderful these trails are and how much we should fight for them and preserve them and connect them and make them accessible, and that they are part of what makes Cherry Hills such a special place and gives it the rural feel. And I'm completely for this. What I'm struggling with are a couple things. So one, where are you finding evidence that the city would have any claim on this? Because you also made a comment earlier that where you said, if these landowners purchase the land without clearing up this right-of-way issue, knowing about it and seeing it on the plat, then that's their issue to contend with now. Well, if they bought it and it is their land, and that's where, when Chair Dahl had mentioned that piece, it's really true. It is their land. If we deny this vacation, so you go to executive session and then you talk about it further, and then you determine that, okay, we're going to deny this request, why would they suddenly be generous and decide that they're going to now work with us when they made a request that we denied? And now we're going to ask them to allow us to use this. I mean, yes, we still will have the right of way, right? It'll still be there. But is that really enhancing the connectivity? Is it still going to be a place where all these neighbors that say they want it there? I mean, why are they not using it now if they have the right of way? So that's another part that I'm kind of struggling with. And then the third piece is, so you have this bridle path that's never been maintained by the city. And so what obligations would the city then have if we were to take this over and make this a more, just put it under the city's control a little bit further? And so the executive session concept just basically tells me that it leads to denying their request, which doesn't lead to better communal relations. And the fact that we now have to go back and ask them for something. And of course, there are some specific legal issues you're bringing up, like maybe there are some embedded things in here that we don't see or we haven't discussed yet that give the city some claim. And I'm just wondering if you see that evidence in here. So it would warrant further discussion. And lastly, I do want to say to Vice Chair Wolf's point, I really agree that it would be great to get the community involved and to have this conversation so that everybody that's immediately impacted by this has a better understanding of why it's so important to keep this right of way. But I mean, is executive session really going to do that? Or is it just going to cause a denial? So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, those are good comments, Chelsea. In my conversations with Emily and with Jay Goldie, this is kind of a fast track here. And my understanding is there isn't time to delay this, even though people say we don't have any legal interest in this, and then I say, well, then why are we talking about it? It's coming before us just almost as a procedural step, but they're not looking for us to either approve or not approve this. They're asking us for a recommendation to go on to P&Z, and then that goes on to City Council, and I understand there are 2 public hearings that are still in the future here with both Planning and Zoning and City Council. And maybe some of these things can be brought up at that point.
Bless you.
Yeah, if I can jump in real quick. This is Emily Fred. Yes, so the process is PTRC gives a recommendation to Planning and Zoning. The Planning and Zoning meeting is a public hearing. So
Public
it
meeting,
will-
public
or
meeting,
sorry,
not a public hearing.
Public meeting, thank you. It will be noticed the same way this one was, with letters sent to all the property owners within 500 feet of 2 and 4 Canito, and noticed in advance. The first City Council meeting will also be a public meeting, noticed the same way, letters to neighbors and posted in advance. And then the second meeting before council is the public hearing. So that has additional notice requirements. It'll be published in the paper. It will be posted on site. So there is still plenty of opportunity for neighbors to weigh in at Planning and Zoning and City Council if they didn't at this meeting and feel that they missed an opportunity. There are plenty more opportunities for people to make their voices heard.
Kathy, would I be completely out of line if I went and talked to Denise Theory personally?
Well, she's represented by council. The applicant is represented by council in form of the trust. And I believe, Ms. Brima can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are approaching the city through this process. And that's how they've chosen to deal with it. And I think the city's got an obligation to follow its process.
So you're telling me no? She's a personal friend.
That's good. I imagine then that if she knew you were on PTRC, she could have talked to you before now if she wanted to.
She does. She does know I'm on PTRC. Yeah.
About this instance. So I believe they've chosen to proceed through this process.
Well, folks, I'm telling you, if this works out and we don't get this, we have blown a huge opportunity. This is not why we exist as a commission, in my mind. There are plenty of other trails in the village that we know about that are dead ends right now. We went through it with Bill Armstrong over on South Vine Way. There are a couple over on West University in my neighborhood that are dead ends, and we really should vacate them because they're never going to go anywhere. But this particular one is, you just look at our trails map and you think that's an obvious blank spot that should be filled in, but wow.
Well, I do want to point out that there are other ways to acquire interest in real property other than, debating over something that is in a particular vacation petition. That's always an option that is available to the city. Should it seek to acquire an easement, acquire something a little different, be a little more creative, there's always a way for a city to work through that and achieve the goals of its master plan as well.
Sure.
And I was going to say that was always suspicious is how does it get this far if there's no chance that the city has any chance of declaring a right? How has it gotten to this point if it's clear cut? If there's no chance that the city has any right of way, then this would have never come to us at all. If there's some small chance that the city has the right of way to these bridle paths, I agree with the other commissioners that we should look further into this and maybe slow this process down a little bit.
Chair Libby,
PTRC is the first step, if I can give you that context. So it's not gotten this far. I mean, I know Amy worked very hard to put this application together, and that took quite a lot of time, but you all are the first step in this process.
Okay, so it's going to be slow no matter what, and we're just,
It's not a fast track.
Not.
Well, but it goes to P and Z at their next meeting probably. And from P and Z, it goes to 2 city council meetings. So when we talk about fast track, slow track, we're talking probably it'll be done within the next 2 to 3 months.
And when
I
this
think with notice requirements it's,
There's a 20-day, right? 20, is it 20 days?
I think it's, yes, it's a 20-day notice requirement before each meeting. So I don't have offhand, I haven't plotted it out, but it might not be as consecutive as, it might not be completely consecutive meeting to meeting because of the notice requirements.
Commissioner Scott?
No, so when it goes to P and Z and then it goes to the city or the council, can they change the recommendation? Like, so if we recommend one, that's one question. Sorry. The second part is it black and white? Just yes, vacate or no vacate? Or are there room for kind of notes, so to speak? Like, can we say, here are the reasons why?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So just so when they go to make their choice, they understand where we were coming from.
Right, so they can choose to accept your recommendation or not. It's a matter of choice, and I'm looking for the specific code provision, but the way the code is written is the authorization to vacate the land rests with city council. You and P&Z serve as advisory bodies to the city council in making that determination, which I mentioned is whether or not it's in the best interest of the city. The city council may impose reasonable conditions upon the vacation of right-of-way, which includes, as Mr. Eber stated, a payment of consideration or other conditions. And then the city council also has some other authority within that. But this provision of your code that speaks to parks and trails to this commission really just says that you need to consider the petition and that P&Z shall obtain recommendations from this commission. It doesn't speak to conditions. Conditions are authorized by city council.
But
And the
similarly-
applicant here, excuse me, Rob.
Go ahead, Fred.
The applicant here, Kathy, these red lines that we see on our aerial, this is a package. It can't be broken up into pieces. It's all or nothing. Is that right?
That is what the applicant has represented. If you have a recommendation that city council or P&Z, the city council impose a condition of X for Y, that is with, my interpretation of this, which is a fairly novel process and fairly novel, rarely used in the village. I know you've seen these before. You can recommend what you want to recommend. City council can choose to accept, reject, and impose whatever conditions it feels are appropriate. I imagine that given this group's familiarity with the trails and your, interest and particular focus on that they will be very interested in whatever recommendations you have to offer. The applicant is seeking this as a package. You don't have to make the recommendation that city council approve this as presented. You can, but you're not required to.
So I put this in the chat, but I wasn't quite sure, and Emily wanted me to say it out loud. I think we can find some common middle ground that Fred and Rob and Steph, all of us is in this. There's somewhere in between we can meet rather than straight out abandoning of what might be really, really valuable rights of way or a bridle pass. I'm not sure. I don't think many of us are interested in really fighting for the top or the north or the diagonal part. So, I would recommend vacation along the north and diagonal paths while reserving a strong interest along the southern bridle path due to the master plan goals and potential connectivity.
And I'm going to just interject here and say my piece, and then we can make some motions and move forward and do whatever. When you look at the trail map for the city has never included this on any of the maps. And so while I understand what our job is, I understand everything else, And I'm not saying we shouldn't go after that piece of property. I just don't believe this request, this vacation is the proper way to go after that piece of property. So my opinion would be that we recommend to go forward with the vacation, and we also simultaneously as PTRC go and speak to these homeowners to see if they would consider granting an easement on that southern edge of their property to make it more accessible.
And none of this would be discussed if that existing bridge were not over the Highline Canal. That's the key in my mind, because then that's the connection. So if we can put wording in there to let people know that we have discussed this, we do think that it needs further discussion, but the diagonal in the north piece, because there's no bridge over the High Line at the west end of the north piece, that doesn't go anywhere. So that's not important in my mind. So who writes this up?
Well, before we worry about that, Fred, let me see if I can jump back in with your permission. I'd like to respond to Commissioner Scott's comment and question to me, kind of in reverse order. Number one, about the public community. I fully agree that the public community ought to know about this. I know we notice our meetings, but as you see, we received 2 public comments from immediately adjacent landowner, not immediately adjacent, excuse me, from neighborhood who it's not surprising that they would be in favor of taking steps to increase the privacy that they have. But I do agree that the community needs to be widely aware of this issue and the pluses and minuses of what it is that we think it could do or not do. The legalities is a different discussion. The legal arguments for public consumption, at least. But the discussion should be open to, and I do very much hope that P&Z and the 2 city council members, meetings, excuse me, bring out as much discussion, frankly, as we got on the e-bikes question. There were people from all over the village that weighed in on that. And, you know, we're only 6,000 people in the village. We're only 6 square miles. Things that happen in the east affect the west and vice versa. And, you know, I hope that people will decide that this is important enough to weigh in on that. So your question, the third, was what needs to be done in terms of maintenance. It's a little bit of a legal call from my understanding, but at the same time, it could be anything from a natural trail that is just marked as an undeveloped nature trail. It could be marked and gone the other way, where like many of our more active trails, there are actually crusher fines on some of them. I mean, the level of development can be many different things. You know, Emily probably can tell you the range of what we do in the city more than I can, but there's no magic recipe other than that you add them to your inventory, you open them up, you mark them as trails, and they need to be maintained. And so that's the answer to the second question, or third question, excuse me. You asked me about purchasing without clearing up, and I'll combine that with my response to the evidence of the claim, both of which are heavily legal arguments that had we gone into executive session, I would give you lots of thoughts that I have as a commissioner and not the city's lawyer, but a lawyer. The city's lawyer would probably give you opinions of the city's lawyer. And we would talk about pros, cons, pluses, minus, risk, rewards, things like that about evidence that this is within our inventory. I am not able to provide those specific arguments to you now.
So, okay, I appreciate that. And thank you for responding to that, Commissioner Eber. I do appreciate that. Here's my question, though. It's maybe a simpler question. So to your point and to Chair Dahl's point, so if we deny this right of way, if we deny the vacation of the right of way, what is that going to accomplish? Does it just keep things as is without the city maintaining it, without the city really having control over it? Is it just kind of status quo and it's accessible still to the public, but it's still not controlled by the city? And then if we approve the vacation of the right of way, is it now everything's also the same except the public just can't access it? The public can't walk on it anymore. I just want to understand this vote like really clearly and in the simplest terms possible without getting into all of the legal details of what we could or couldn't do upon further discussion, because ultimately at the end of this, that's basically what we need to do, is an all or nothing kind of decision. And I want to know the consequences of that decision either way, as it relates to what the city can do with these trails.
And Commissioner Scott, if I could just clarify real quick, because you said the city public can or cannot use it. So you're talking about rights to use it as opposed to physically accessing it. Because right now, the southern easement is behind a fence. So no one.
Yeah, no one uses this.
They're not using it currently.
So,
they walk up the trail from Shenango and take a hard left and get over to the High Line and they walk along the fence, but no one is walking. I think we've heard some anecdotal evidence that potentially neighbors or some people might wander through, but basically it's not being currently used by the public.
So, and I appreciate that. That's super helpful. So denying this vacation, would that just leave it that way then? Everything just stays the same, right? Nothing changes. People can't access through the south. They barely can access through this cut through between 2 and 4, Canito, but they can come off the High Line to the northern one, right? So I mean, that's just kind of how it remains.
It basically is status quo for all intents and purposes, and from the public perspective. And staff, feel free to weigh in on this, but for the landowner, things change, legally speaking, if the city vacates any interest that it may have in these easements, because then there's that ordinance, if it is approved, gets recorded. And then there's record evidence that the city does not lay claim to these easements outlined in red.
So really, and thank you, that really helps. So really, if we deny this vacation today, and then that continues on through P&Z and through the council, if that happens and it's completely denied, the next step then would be, if the city wants to have claim on it and wants to change this and make this more accessible, many, many, many other steps need to be taken, and the homeowners ultimately need to approve those, right? They legally need to provide access. And so whether or not that can happen or not, is that why you wanted to go into executive session, Commissioner Eber, because you want to find out what we can do after this vacation issue is over?
No, that's not why I would go into executive session. I would go into executive session to discuss the validity of the city's claims on these easements.
And if I could jump in, executive session is a limited exception to open meetings law. It can only be authorized for certain purposes. The one that was raised by Mr. Eber is for legal advice. So it would be just legal advice about this petition, right? So that's the only thing we could have discussed in there, not what might happen, et cetera.
Right. So I would not have used it for purposes of talking about what happens after it's either approved or denied. I guess I would take a step back and say that we have heard from the applicant that this is an all or nothing proposal, that we are being asked to vote on whether we recommend the vacation of all of them or none of them, or not to approve of that. We're not being asked to say what we would approve. We are being asked to approve what has been proposed, which is all of them.
And if we city council, remember, considered a preliminary petition that was the same, all or nothing. And they had to make a determination preliminarily whether or not this proposal was meritorious to begin with, to let the applicant know, go ahead and spend the money and the time to prepare this application. So this has been in this form for quite some time.
Right. Now, That said, if our approval or denial of the request to vacate contains conditions like the city attorney said, we can write whatever we want. It's a recommendation to those above us. And if our recommendation is that we think there's merit to A but not B, then we can make that recommendation. But we are voting thumb up or thumb down on this entire red line that it just hit me. It looks like a game of hangman here if I was going to look at. But with that said, you know, I do think we are being asked up or down. We are making a recommendation, as you've heard lots of times from the city attorney. There's no requirement for anybody above us to follow our recommendation. But we are a stopping point according to the code because we are the citizen representatives regarding parks and trails and recreational opportunities within the city.
And
So, go ahead.
I understand that fully. What I'm really still not able to see is where the opportunity comes in for us to do something with these specific access points, these bridle trails that will benefit the public, because I feel like it's a multiple step process after this. And I just don't see the evidence. And again, I know there's a lot of documentation here. I can't say that I understand or know every detail of it. I don't, but I'm saying I don't see anything that shows that there's any city, the possibility that the city can come in and now make this part of really the Highline Canal. And so I really want to, I do support, and I'm here to support our trails and our parks and our recreating. Absolutely. I just seems like this would be an even further elongated process that goes way outside of just this request on the vacation. And sure, you can deny the vacation, but then what happens there? And I just think that's a much longer and much more legal conversation that has a lot of steps after it. So I don't know, that's.
Let me see if I can jump in, and I'm sorry, Chair, let me just real quickly say, you asked what happens afterwards. And to the best that I can understand, what happens afterwards, if all the way up to council level, there was no vacation. Well, you see a property, a bridle path that is in between two parcels that the applicant owns on each side. At some point, somebody's going to do one thing or the other. Either the city's going to go out and put signs up that says, we think these are public trails, or the applicant is going to put up bigger fences that say, you can't be here, and the city's going to do something to say, yes, we can. So that's the way I see what comes next. The question again, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I sure hope it doesn't reach that point.
Well, I mean, to be honest, without getting into legal discussion, the applicant uses the same rationale that was used in the litigation piece to the north. Without talking about legal discussion, that's the argument that they're posing in their application to us. And, you know,
well, that's the precedent. You're right, Rob. That's the precedent. But that precedent, to my knowledge of Cherry Hills and a lot of the people who live here, that precedent rubbed a whole lot of people the wrong way.
Well, and I'm not going to go into any of the legal discussion because I don't want to, and it's not appropriate. But
yeah,
your comment about that it's the playbook is what I'm telling you is the same as that the arguments that are here are the same ones. We all had an opportunity. I asked for the Maven order, the district court order. So I've seen sort of the playbook and the arguments. You guys may not have seen it, not for any particular reason that's suspicious or anything. I just asked for it. I knew about this litigation. I was interested in the litigation before. I followed the litigation from before. Whether or not things that were said there apply here, the city attorney's already told us lots of times. It depends on applying the facts to the specific facts here and a lot of the specific facts that we have here. we have lots of legal arguments that we could talk about in an executive session that would tell us whether or not, but right now, I'm telling you that as PTRC, we shouldn't give up legal arguments until we know whether or not they're really winners or losers, and whether or not council is willing to take on risks and rewards and things like that.
Can I just interject really quick? Kathy, can you clarify when we talk about executive session? Discussing legal arguments is not a part of it. Getting legal advice is the purpose of executive session. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to make that clear that it isn't about us going into executive session to discuss the validity of the legal arguments and how strong they are or not strong they are. It is executive session. The purpose of it, so that it doesn't violate the Open Meeting Act, is so that we can get legal advice on a topic.
In a confidential manner, just like any individual is entitled to from their attorney.
Okay.
That said, legal advice requires you to know how strong your claim is. So talking about strengths, weaknesses, talking about probabilities, likelihood, precedents,
But
all
it's
of those
our
things.
discussion, it's asking questions of Kathy. That's what I want. If you want to go into an executive session, that's the issue, is I want to make sure that we follow all the rules that we're supposed to follow. And it is truly asking questions. It is not PTRC having discussions regarding the validity of legal claims.
Well, I think that it is, I personally think that's exactly what legal advice is to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your litigation.
Well, I would talk about them and you would decide whether or not to accept my advice. As I
Yeah,
think
it's not a
that's
discussion of
aligned.
PTRC. We listen.
Yeah. And well, I mean, yeah,
But having a discussion about the legal advice that we were given, if it cannot take place in an executive session, has to take place in public hearing. And public hearing means that we talk about the advice that we were given. That's why it takes place in executive session.
yeah, you can discuss, you can ask questions, but it is all tailored to advice.
Correct. So, you know, we've kind of bounced around a little bit about executive session or not. I want to try and refocus us to the idea of voting yay or nay on to vacate. And if in the event that we do agree that it should be vacated, in every other proceeding that takes place, and the part of the code provision is that it results in, you know, consideration being paid or conditions being placed upon the vacation. And my comment to this commission is that only one person benefits from the diagonal north-south line, and that is the property owner. You can argue whether or not the public is the only loser, clearly, of that. I mean, the guy wants to combine two pieces of property into one. And where I'm going on this is, historically, we have asked a surveyor to come in and say, you know, it's 20 feet wide by 580 foot long, which is X square foot. The price of property in Cherry Hills Village is X dollars per acre, and you divide that and pay for what it is that's gone. My argument to the commission is that it doesn't say the fair market value, it just says consideration. And my argument is if you looked at 2 Cantato Lane and say it was at one price, and 4 Cantato, it was at one price, and the property combined is not A plus B, but it's synergistically better, that it's greater than A plus B, because now you have an uninterrupted 12-acre parcel. So my comment to you is, I would like to make a recommendation that if in the event this is ever approved, that it be for multiples of the fair market value of what the land is that is being vacated. Let's be honest, applicant is doing this 100% for the purposes of making privacy and excluding the public. You have heard Commissioner Vice Chair Wolf say, this neighborhood doesn't want riffraff and public in their area. You know what? The consideration of walling out all these other people is more than, for purposes of the village, should be more than just the market value of what is given up of the exact easement square footage. this person synergistically benefits, and any applicant that combines lots synergistically benefits. And my comment to you is that the city should be asking for far more than just the market value on a per acre basis of what this is being vacated, if in fact we agree to vacate it. My first comment to you is it shouldn't be vacated. However, if it does get vacated or we agree that it should be vacated, I suggest that we make a proposal that it be multiples of the fair market value for which it is being vacated.
I need to just advise this commission that although city council has the authority to impose conditions, there's a qualifier in that authority. Your code says that city council may impose reasonable conditions. Reasonable is not defined, but I would ask you to analyze any condition that you might seek to recommend be couched in terms of reasonableness or thought through in terms of reasonableness.
The other, and I don't know, we can figure out how we want to proceed on this. My recommendation would be to recommend to vacate the easements and make the recommendation to both P&Z, well, and ultimately City Council, that they work with the homeowners to see if they would be willing to grant a proper easement that there is not potential litigation around on the south edge of the property so that we can connect the trail systems.
Second.
I don't think it was a motion, but
Well, I seconded it. If it turned-
It's getting late.
I respectfully disagree from the fact that you don't give up any of your leverage.
I appreciate it, Commissioner Scott and Commissioner Ebert. I appreciate that.
You
Emily,
don't give away your leverage before you, and then tell them that you'd like to work out something when you potentially have a legal claim to be there anyway. I think I respectfully tell my fellow commissioners, the only option that you have to maintain any discussion about a solution to this is if the city continues to assert that it has every right to all three of these legs. And
I can understand that and I can respect that. I see it. I think you can see things multiple ways. And my position would be if we deny it and everybody denies it, we for sure are not going to enter into any discussions at all. So I guess, Emily, at this point, do we need, because it's recommendation, do we need to make we do need to make a motion, Kathy? Okay.
I think you should make a motion and vote, especially, and we have a record.
Okay.
so let me ask you,
Emily?
Just for PTRC, just as a reminder to PTRC, we will be providing your draft minutes to planning and or your approved minutes, if they're approved by then, to planning and zoning. And then they also will go to council and council packet. So both P&Z and council will see all of the consideration that you made and all of these discussions. So don't feel that you have to capture all of that somehow in a recommendation or in a motion. They'll have all of your minutes and all of this discussion.
Okay.
But
Can
will we have a chance to see our minutes before they actually go to P&Z?
It depends on the timing of the next meeting. Sometimes we bring, if you haven't approved them, they are marked as draft when they go to the next commission or to council. So if your next meeting falls before P&Z, we'll have them have your approved minutes, but they'll be in draft form.
Well, I would just hope that the minutes truly reflect what we've all been talking about. That's all.
They're pretty good.
I hope they always do.
may I make a question and a request that we vote on the recommendation and we work after that vote on the conditions or the text of a recommendation that goes with this, depending on what happens with the vote. Because I think we're being asked to vote on a recommendation, which is first and foremost our duty. The caveats or the conditions or the whatever seem to go after that. So my suggestion is that we just first have a motion about vacating or not vacating.
If you're going to impose conditions as part of your recommendation, I'll let the city clerk jump in if I'm wrong, but I think we would want that all to be included with your recommendation and then vote that up or down, rather than have a motion and then have separate conditions that aren't attached.
Okay. Let me see if I can move us along. I would like to I move to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission that the city not vacate the city's interest, if any, in the bridle path easements 2 and 4 Canito Lane as depicted in the vacation petition. I'm done.
A second.
Pamela, will you call for a vote?
Yes, I can. Chair Stephanie Dahl,
No, wait. Now, we are voting on just exactly what Rob just said?
Correct.
And before, we were just voting on whether to go into executive session or not. So that's passed.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so Rob is saying we're gonna deny the vacation.
To recommend to P and Z, not to.
Yes, yes, okay.
And it's getting late and I've worked all day and I'm real tired. So if I vote no, I am not in agreement with Rob. That is correct. Then Pamela, my vote is no. Thank you. Sorry, everybody.
okay, Vice Chair Wolf,
I'm voting yes in agreement with Rob, yes.
okay, and Commissioner Eber
Yes.
and Commissioner Leviton
Yes.
and Commissioner Scott.
No.
We have three yes and 2 no.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
All right.
So now could I make a motion to say that our recommendation is conditional, but I wouldn't know how to word that.
No,
No.
we've already done the motion.
Yeah, you move to deny the to recommend denial of the vacation.
Do we say why, or we just hope that they read the minutes close enough?
You hope that they read the minutes just as closely as you read your packets.
Okay.
And we can also appear before P and Z as members of the public to give our own individual opinions. And we can also talk about what is in the record that was before PTRC.
Great. Emily, when is that meeting? I guess I can find it myself.
I have to double check the notice. I will send PTRC an email.
Okay.
Because it will likely appear on the May agenda, but I need to double check the notice and that they don't have, that works for their agenda also.
So we cannot appear before P and Z and identify ourselves as being a member of the PTRC. Is that right?
Well, you have
No.
spoken as a body.
Yeah,
So that recommendation stands as PTRC. If you want to appear as an individual and clarify that you're speaking in your individual capacity.
Yeah, just an individual capacity, our feeling about the trail system.
Yep.
yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, good.
All right. Okay, this issue is closed, I think, for now. Amy, thank you. I know it is a long evening. We appreciate you being here and you sharing.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And now we can move on to any, I don't think we had unfinished business. Emily, you didn't tell me that there was our audience participation never showed up, correct?
He did not.
Okay. So we will go to reports. I will, if I can get my thing on first. My little remarkable, get to my notes. Okay, so for me, a couple of things. I had the opportunity to go to the city council meeting last month and just share with them kind of our rationale and our reasoning behind both the e-bikes as well as the sorry, trying to look at my notes. The permitting arguments that we heard and then ultimately voted on. Just a little bit of feedback from the council in terms of the e-bikes and the discussion. And I think this came up for us in our commission or in our discussions when we were talking about e-bikes, but really it had to do with kind of just generally etiquette on our trails. And so not for tonight because it is late and we will put it a different day. But just, I think council would like us to look at, you know, the etiquette that exists on our trails, the speed, should we be dropping the speed limit? People wearing headphones, not saying, you know, on your left and, you know, and it's even things they mentioned as well. It's not just the bicyclists, it's people letting dogs and kids run across trails zigzagging where, you know, it can cause accidents and things like that. So, you know, there was conversations around ordinances to enforce speed limits on the trails and different things like that. So nothing for us tonight, but just know that I think City Council would like us to take a deeper dive into just kind of etiquette and the safety of our trails and making sure, specifically the Highline Canal really, but making sure that we are in a place where everybody who uses our trails are feeling safe, you know, because it's not just e-bikes that are issues on our trails. The other thing I wanted to add is that I am the treasurer for Cherry Hills Village PTCO, elementary PTCO, and we were having a discussion about 5th grade graduation. And I don't have 5th grade, I have littles, but they are going to use, I think, John Mead Park and the Allen Hutto Commons for their 5th grade continuation. So I was able to put the principal in touch with Emily, and they are all working on that, and everybody's really excited. And I know that at our last meeting, there was discussion about maybe this would be a great place moving forward. So it's great to see our children and our families being able to get out there and utilize the park and see everything that's been done. And so I think people are excited. So that is all I have for my report. I will just go around. Commissioner Leviton, anything you would like to add?
Nope, no report.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott.
Nope, nothing for me.
Commissioner Eber.
Few things. Thank you. Be quick here. Thanks to the city for your continued efforts on all of the village's behalf. I know we had a March snowstorm that came in just the wrong time for a lot of city workers who had to work on weekends, and you know, whether it was open space and parks or whether it was whatever it was all hands on deck. So I wanted to say thank you again on behalf of all of us. You guys do a fabulous job and we greatly appreciate everything you do. Next is that as we saw on the map, and Emily, if you can just real quickly go back and bring the trail map system up. And while she's doing that, I'll just quickly tell you what I'm bringing it up for is you will see lots of on-street trail with yellow maps and yellow dots, excuse me. It has come to my attention and understanding that those are nothing more than beliefs that they are trails that are on streets. They do not have any particular designation and meritorious. They are not designated as trails of the city other than the fact that they show up in yellow on the map. I would like us as PTRC to see that those yellow become formalized trails on, even if they are on street, they should be recognized as actual trails and get the protections and interests that all of the trails have. And specifically, I think the next step that goes along with that, and part of that politeness and general use of how we use our trails, is in my neighborhood, which is up in the very northeast corner there of the map. We have a huge speed problem, and it's on street and on street trails. And I would like to see that our trails that are on streets get recognized as real trails. And I would like to see that signage be put up that say that there are trails on public streets, please go slowly, or whatever the appropriate language is. Because if you look, there's an awful lot of yellow. And they are very important parts of the city for our, and I can just tell you that they are used just as heavily as all the red. And they should be formalized and get the protections of the regular trail. And many of the residents that I have talked about this with are in agreement that we need to do something to formalize the protections that go and formally designating these as trails. So I would like that to become something that we move forward with. The third is much less important, and that is we have some areas where our roads are plowed directly into or near public open space. I'm talking in my particular neighborhood about the area with Volunteer Park up there in the Northeast. This is not necessarily a city-caused moment that I am talking about, but we have dirt roads. When plowing companies plow, they gouge into the dirt road and push the snow and dirt across into our parks, causing a deposition of sand and dirt and gravel that then kills all the grass that's in the edge of the park, which kills, like I said, the grass and adversely impacts our parks. So I'm not sure what we can do, but it has been brought to my attention that this is a problem. There are lots of piles of dirt all in the edges of the right-of-way and in public parks that now public or private property owners, excuse me, are responsible for, or should be made responsible for going and getting, so that they don't kill our park grasses. Number 4 in the same idea is I've talked to a lot of people who are concerned about the length of grass that we are allowing to grow in our public open spaces. With COVID, we've had huge amounts of use of our public open spaces, and they would like to see, or they currently do see, an awful lot of erosion and, digging out and, widening of trails that are in our public spaces. And they really want to reestablish our vegetation and allow it to grow higher, taller, and maybe be more drought tolerant and better receptive to the erosion. So I would like to have a discussion maybe with Jeff as the right point of contact, but see if we can start and figure out that we can get longer, better grass in our public open spaces. Next is that we talked a little bit during the hearing, during the meeting, about the consideration that is given in the event of vacating a piece of property. I appreciate council's comment that we are allowed to ask for reasonable things. My argument is if the property on the left is worth $3 million and on the right is worth $3 million, and combined they're worth $10 million, and yet it's only a small piece of parcel that might be worth $500,000 is what is vacated, that property has unduly benefited to the tune of $3.5 million as a result of being able to vacate and pay the city only $500,000. So reasonable does not necessarily mean market. And I would like to enter into an actual discussion where we propose a factor that is more than just the actual market value of the land that is vacated in the event that these come into play, and provide a little bit more detail and guidance. So I'd like to see that brought up into our agendas. The other part is, we talked earlier about etiquette. Speed limits on trails and roads is a huge problem, especially the on-street trails. And I would like to, for that reason, see that the city dedicate times to protect the people and the many people who are on the trails by making a recommendation that the police department come into areas that have on-street trails and actually either lower or enforce the speed limits that we already have. The next item is that a couple meetings ago, we looked at the model form on reserving or sort of the Allen Hutto Commons. We did not look at the underlying reservation form for all city parks and open spaces. I believe, Emily, you mentioned that that is something that we could do later on. And I would like to make sure that that doesn't fall from our list, because I think there are a whole lot of revisions that need to be made that are more protective of our parks and open spaces, and at the same time allow them to also be even more used and loved by more people that get into them. So I would like to report that lots of people I talk to also talk about that. Finally, I received many comments from people who have already taken advantage of our new Hutto Commons and Mead Park, especially the playground. The reports that I got are that kids are running to the equipment and loving it to the extent, and I will even make a quote that one child said, "This is the best place ever," unquote. So at least we have done something right in the eyes of that child. And I did want to again thank the city for spending a lot of money and a lot of time and energy to go into this park because it is well loved. And the next place that people go and they run to is to the little wet area that is as you come off of the lake and into the little stream area that's the play zone. It does bring up the point that we do need to amend the city ordinance that prohibits swimming or wading in any of the waters of the village. So at least as to that 100-foot zone or whatever it is, we need to amend the ordinance that prohibits swimming in waters of the village. And then similarly, we need to reinforce that it's very easy for the waders to go up into the pond area where people are fishing. And we want to say that this is the limit of where you can swim and wade and make sure that people don't understand it's not a general allowance to go swimming in all of the ponds, because that question actually did come up to me is, can I go swimming in the ponds now? So that is my report, and I hope that we can take action commensurate with all the items that are in my report. And I appreciate again the opportunity to serve on the commission.
Vice Chair Wolf.
A couple points, and I appreciate my conversation with Jay Goldie last week. I told him that I was on one of our bridle trails, and a family came roaring by me on e-bikes, mom on one, dad on one, little boy on one, and it's a narrow path, and they could have, I might as well have been invisible. And so my comment to Jay was, when are we going to get some signs up in Cherry Hills letting people know that we do not want e-bikes on our trails? And there are 12 different access points between Hamden and Bellevue on the Highline Canal that should have eventually, sooner rather than later, a sign indicating that about e-bikes. So Jay said that they were aware of that. Then I told him about several intersections in the village that are major access points to our trails. And some of them have several trails coming together, and there's not one single sign at that intersection saying dogs must be on a leash, no e-bikes, that kind of thing. And I think that's needed. And I told Jay that, and he said, okay, Fred, why don't you start working on a sign plan? And I have started working on a sign plan that eventually I will present to the commission on what signs should be placed in all these different intersections. And they're far apart. We're not talking about sign clutter. We're just talking about informing and educating the people that use our trails as to what's expected. There's not a day that goes by that I don't see dogs running out, running wild, poop bags being left on the trail, which just drives me crazy. So we have some work to do in front of us to bring all that together, and maybe that ties in with some of Rob's comments about the on-street trails, that we should let people know it is an on-street trail, and you should be watching out for cyclists as well as walkers. So that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you. Emily, staff reports.
Emily's gone home.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Really, my only report is that for the next meeting, I plan to bring a summary of what council had asked PTRC to look at with regards to all the issues that Stephanie had mentioned, you know, that it's not just e-bikes, that it's also speeding on the trails and trail etiquette issues. So I'll bring those to PTRC at the next meeting in a more concrete form for you to go through sort of step by step. And really, other than that, just an update that we're starting to dip our toes into thinking about special events for this year. We're really trying to understand the new guidelines that are coming out and still working on that. So just a heads up that we're starting to plan. We know they're going to look different, and I'll have more information for you hopefully at the May meeting. And that's all I have. Thanks.
I think Governor Polis said that the pandemic would be over by July for the All-Star Game. So anytime after that sounds great, Emily.
Hope so.
All right. If there is nothing else, we will adjourn the meeting. It is still Thursday, April 8th at 8:18 p.m.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, everybody.
Good
Okay.
night.
Good
Nice
night.
to see you all.